President Trump has just about had it when it comes to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. This morning, he blasted Vladimir Putin for raining down strikes on Ukraine, telling him to stop and to get a peace deal done.
Trump issued a warning to Ukrainian President Zelensky: accept peace or keep fighting until you lose your entire country.
Trump took to Truth Social to express his frustration. He was particularly angry at Zelensky, saying Ukraine will not recognize Crimea as part of Russia now. Trump wrote, "This statement is very harmful to the peace negotiations with Russia in that Crimea was lost years ago under the auspices of President Barack Hussein Obama. It is not even a point of discussion. Nobody is asking Zelensky to recognize Crimea as Russian territory, but if he wants Crimea, why didn't they fight for it 11 years ago when it was handed over to Russia without a shot being fired?"
Well, here's Trump at the Oval Office yesterday.
I think we have a deal with Russia. We have to get a deal with Zelensky, and I hope that Zelensky, I thought it might be easier to deal with Zelensky. So far it's been harder, but that's okay. It's all right.
Zelensky said in a statement this week that recognizing the occupation of Crimea is against their constitution and that there's nothing to talk about here.
Trump issued a so-called final offer peace deal earlier in April. Here are some of the bigger takeaways from that. The U.S. will recognize the Crimean Peninsula as Russian territory. That's one. The U.S. pledges to not support Ukraine's NATO entry. Then Ukraine would get a robust security guarantee from European militaries. Russia would then return portions of Kyiv to Ukraine. Ukraine would get post-war rebuilding assistance and access to the Dnieper River. So that's the deal, and frankly, Lindsey, I think it is the best possible deal for Ukraine anyway, so I, like President Trump, hope that both sides come to the table and can agree to it. I don't see how things could possibly get better for Ukraine without a not just current, continued military assistance from the U.S., but actually stepped up military assistance, including boots on the ground. There's no plan. Military advisors for Ukraine and for the U.S. say there is no plan and no ability for Ukraine to actually win this war with Russia and drive them from the country. So all we're talking about, all we're negotiating is how much of their country Ukraine actually gets to hold on to. That's unfortunate. I wish we lived in some magical fantasy land where Russia never did this or Russia could be defeated, but we don't. We have to deal with reality. And in reality, Russia is going to hold on to some of the territory it took, and Ukraine should not be joining NATO, but then they will be defended by their European neighbors who should, in my view, be responsible for Ukraine's security more than us anyway. It's their backyard. They should have to deal with this. That seems best case scenario to me. Where am I wrong?
So that's the plan. Let Russia keep stolen land.
Well, what's the alternative?
Because Crimea was illegally annexed in 2014, so we're just saying let the dictators win. I think that the U.S. has a moral authority to get involved here, especially because, and yes, look at Biden, was dangling possible NATO entry over Ukraine's head for a while. And so now I think the country's in a precarious position that we have to follow through with.
Well, I agree with
not only sending a message that we will stand up to dictators, but also sending a bigger message that you can't just take over other space. Like, so what about the Baltic? What about Baltic nations? Like, Russia can keep on going. Where will they stop? Because obviously they don't respect Trump. I mean, they literally were bombing Ukraine yesterday when he said he had to all caps stop on social media. So, and that didn't change anything. So at the same time, you're going to go to, they're both going to be in Rome this weekend, both Zelensky and the president, for the funeral of the Pope, and Trump's not even willing to have a conversation with him. And I think once we started it as Americans to get involved from the beginning, we should follow through with protecting people that we have this relationship with and have been an ally to us.
We've given them billions and billions and billions of dollars. How have we not followed through? I agree with you that Biden made a huge mistake dangling NATO, just the U.S. in general, the U.S. government even before Biden, made a huge mistake dangling potential NATO inclusion, which Russia cites as their motivation to attack Ukraine in the first place. Now, I'm not saying we should take what the Russian government says just on face value or what Putin says just on face value, but that was one of their motivations. Look, again, I hear you. In an ideal world, I don't want to give a Russian dictator any ground either, but what is the alternative? You say we stand up to a dictator, but what does that actually mean? That's just rhetoric. Unless we're going to, are you saying we should commit U.S. forces to the defense of Ukraine? That would be the beginning of World War III. That would take, don't we have to declare war on Russia to do that? Do the U.S. people want to declare war on Russia? Do we want an actual confrontation with a nuclear power over
That's not
who
what we were
runs
sold
this.
on the campaign trail. Trump sold the fact that he has great relationships with both Zelensky, and Putin, and that he's going to solve this immediately. And it seems like he's having trouble mostly solving it with the person that's most our ally. And I think it just is a bigger message, a bigger moral message for the entire world that maybe we're not the superpower we think we are, or Trump wasn't who he said he was on the campaign trail. If this is the best he came up with, is like, let the dictator have what they want, pretty much, and then go ahead and keep bombing when we already said please stop. And he said just as earlier this week that Russia was ready to come to the table with a deal. At the same time, you're also bombing Kyiv. It doesn't make sense to me. And I think that that's important to understand how much control Trump actually has in this situation. He sold a dream, and now that dream is completely deferred from what he sold on the campaign trail.
I would say Biden and Harris sold a dream of of supporting Ukraine. They said without end for as long as it would take. Well, there is no level of support from the U.S., sort of actual military involvement, that was going to save Ukraine in the long run from being conquered by Russia. That's not just my weird opinion about the situation. That is the opinion of our military advisors, and that's the opinion of Zelensky's military advisors. There's always these neocon fantasies that we can swoop in and just rearrange global events the way that we want. That is not the case. And again, I ask, what should we do if not compel these two feuding leaders to accept this plan by arguing that they should? And if they're not willing to, then I don't know. I don't want to be involved, and probably Russia's going to conquer all of Ukraine, and that's very regrettable, but what else can be done other than accept this plan?
Well, I think that's why we have high-level positions in government to solve that answer to that question. But what I know for sure,
but I've already solved it. They should adapt that. They should take that plan.
That doesn't work for our closest ally in the situation.
Well,
I think
does getting
democracy
conquered work?
Well, democracy abroad means democracy at home. So I think the bigger meaning is that if we don't stand up and stand alongside Ukraine, there's a larger message that we're sending, that basically we are weak and we have allowed them to get this far and go this far and winning. I mean, they're not just taking the beating and nothing's happening. They're fighting back against Russia. And so we're leaving them in the dust at this point, and took them this far just to say, listen, let them take this illegally annexed location.
But hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and Russians are dying in this conflict, are dying in defense of this country. I want to bring it to an end because I don't think thousands of people dying is a good thing. Just to send a message that we're willing to have this battle out, even though we will eventually lose it, frankly, it's like a cavalier, approach to life. The whole country's being destroyed.
It's going to be a cavalier approach to the rest of the world if we say, hey, any dictator, you got carte blanche on any area.
It's not carte blanche.
Want.
We are obligated to defend. They're not in NATO.
Right.
We are not obligated to defend them. We are obligated to defend countries that are in NATO. And Russia knows that, which is why they're not going to attack a NATO country.
And if Russia keeps moving, the next step will be attacking nearby or a NATO country. And then what? Are we waiting until that happens to then start a war with Russia, or are we going to stop them now and send a message that we're not even going to allow you to get close to a NATO country?
France and Germany and the UK really thought Russia was about to march across Europe like the second coming of Hitler.
Don't be dramatic.
Something.
March across.
Wouldn't they be committing more of their own resources, their own troops to defending Ukraine? Wouldn't they at the very least wean themselves off their addiction to Russian energy production if they thought that they were actually in a them-us global struggle with Russia akin to the Nazis or something? I would think they would not be buying energy from them. What seems to me is that this is not an existential effort, that no one is behaving as if it is an existential situation, except maybe Western liberal media. And I don't think what's happening is good. I don't think what Russia is doing is right. I wish it could be prevented, but I have to live in the real world. And to my mind, the only method that is reasonable, that doesn't involve us getting in a larger conflict with Russia, something there's no desire to do, right? Are there people in the streets of America saying we really want a all-out war with a nuclear power? I don't think so. I think the best we can do is something along the lines of the deal that's being discussed.
And I think the best first step that Trump can do is take the time to meet with Zelensky this weekend and stop pretending like he doesn't know that he's going to the Pope's funeral, and have a conversation with a man who obviously doesn't think this solution is satisfactory. Just start there.
Well, right. I don't like to, I'm not one who's going to blame Zelensky. There's some of that on the right. I don't think it's obviously his fault that his country was invaded, but his kind of posture that, we will fight them to the last man, that kind of, it's not realistic. his military advisors know it's not realistic. So I would like to see peace, even if it's going to make us unhappy with the condition Ukraine is left in.
And just hope that Russia doesn't carry on.
Well, they're going to carry on if we
anymore.
do nothing. If we don't make a deal, they'll carry on. They'll conquer the whole country. After everyone is
I
dead
think
and all the
it's a bit
cities
of
are
a deterrent,
destroyed.
right? America's a superpower for a reason, so I don't know.
Well,
We're going to have to leave it there and
all
just
right.
see what happens this weekend.
Tell us what you think. Up next, has the president soured on tariffs? Is he softening his stance on China? More Rising right after this.